Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. Everything here is great. In 2020, I culled my collection of over 400 games down to about 75. And today we're going to talk about a couple of the games that stayed and why they stayed. And since this is the start of a new kind of series ongoing thing for this channel, I thought I would start with two games you probably cannot own and probably cannot play, just because I wanted to tell you about them. We're going to talk today about Powerpuff Girls, The Villain at Large, and Plague and Pestilence. So let's start with Powerpuff Girls, Villains at Large. Both of these games have been out of print for over 2 decades, so chances of you finding one to play are very, very slim unless you find me and decide that you want to play this with me. Powerpuff Girls Villains at Large was bought by a friend of mine as kind of a joke. We both loved the Powerpuff Girls cartoon. If you've never seen it, it was a 90s cartoon that really kind of made fun of the superhero genre by, portraying these 3 little girls who just went out and destroyed their entire city every episode. Pretty funny. And he was at Target in the late 90s, early 2000s. And this game was on sale for like $3. And so he bought it because he was like, it's $3, let's try it. Now this was back in the day when Target did not have what we called hobby games now. They just had the mass market stuff, and this was a mass market Milton Bradley title. I love this game. This game stayed because it's a really good game. Something like 10, 15 years ago, I did a write-up about this game on BGG. I did a full review and talked about how great it was. After playing my friend's copy of the game, we went to Target, and there was one more copy left that I bought for myself. And then I found another copy of this years ago in a thrift store and bought it and ended up giving it to somebody who read my review and wanted to play it. So the game is super, super simple. And I'm going to be honest, I think that I like it 2-player more than any other player count. It will play up to 4, but I think 2-player works really well. And the reason that it stayed is because of how simple it is. It's a super easy to understand game. It's just a bunch of cards with numbers on them and a couple of extra special power cards that have, various abilities. And you're controlling the 3 girls. And you're using these 3 girls to collect villains, the villains at large. And the way it works is, on your turn, you can play cards from your hand to take control of one of the girls, or all of the girls, and you can also use those same cards to beat up one of the villains. The goal of the game is to get a number of gems. Whoever has the most gems at the end of the game wins. And villains have, their own little power. They don't have special powers, they just have a strength. So in order to beat Fuzzy, I would have to have 6 power. I could do that by playing a card with a 6, or I could, play a 4 and a 2, or whatever. Any leftover is lost, by the way. That's important. So the way it works is, if nobody has controls of a girl, say I want to take Buttercup because I have this 6 and I'm going to beat Fuzzy Lumpkin. If nobody has Buttercup, I can play any Buttercup card and put her in front of me. Now I control Buttercup, and I can use Buttercup's cards to fight the villains. If I do not have the girl in front of me, I cannot use their cards to fight the villains. I can only use their cards to take control of them. So if you have Blossom and I want Blossom, I could play a 7 and say, I want Blossom. If you can defend, if you have a card of equal or higher strength, you could defend, and I don't get to take Blossom. If you don't, I get to take Blossom. So I'd play my 7, I would take Blossom. Now I have two girls, and I can spend combinations of their cards, say 13, to beat Mojo Jojo. And now I get Mojo Jojo. We do this in turns until the whole deck of villains has been beaten, and then we total up gems and see who wins. This is one of those brilliant little games that, it's always been the way, it's always been true that mass market IP-laden games are just terrible. They're just slapped a name on a design and threw it out there and said, here we go. The rules usually suck. The rules in this game are very, very good. They actually detail the game very well. There's no ambiguity. It just works. It's a very simple game. The thing that I really like about it, and the reason that I think this works best with 2 players, is at the end of every player's turn, everybody draws a card. And so in two-player, there's this hand management aspect of, do I take control of a girl now to stop you from having her because there's some easy villains out there and I don't want you to take them? Do I hold on and try to draw up a bigger hand so that I can have bigger plays? It works really, really well back and forth that way. When you introduce more players, it still works. 3-player works fine. 4 players is a little too chaotic because the girls are constantly getting shuffled around and you really just kind of have to wait and hold your hand until something happens, but also the monsters or the villains run out very quickly. So I think it works best with 2. This is a gem of a game. This will stay in my collection forever, and it saddens me that it never became more than just the Powerpuff Girls. I think that this would be a very easy game to skin with other IPs, and I have often thought about revamping this game with my own twist and trying to figure out if I could make it work. I have not done that, but maybe someday I will. So Powerpuff Girls Villains at Large, chances are you'll never be able to play this game. It was such a mass market, miss, I guess. It didn't last long. I don't think you can find this anywhere. You could try. The second game we're going to discuss is Plague and Pestilence. This game was a very limited release. This is the Chessex version, which I believe they only printed like 500 or maybe 1,000 of these. The original was released by Hillary's Toy Box. It came in like one of those plastic card containers, and there was only maybe a couple hundred of those. So this is a very, very, very rare game, and that is the only reason it's in my collection. I would say this is a game. This is a... I kind of hesitate to call it a game. It's more of like an activity. And it's one that me and my friends played a lot of, but mostly because it's a very sociable game. You don't really have to pay attention. There's not a lot going on here. You just have to roll some dice and play some cards. So the way this works is, at the start of the game, we are in what's called Prosperity. On your turn, you're going to roll some dice, and based on your dice roll, you're going to get a number of PPs, which are population points, from the deck. So everybody's going to have some number of population points initially, and then you're going to gain population points while we're in Prosperity. You're also going to have a hand of cards that do things like Viking raids, or floods, or fires, or city walls. So these cards are going to be played against other players to damage their city, or you're going to be able to play things like negotiate peace, which will stop a crusade or a war, or build an aqueduct which protects you from drought and fire. You can't be targeted by those cards. So you're going to be doing this stuff, taking each other's population points, trying to gain population points for yourself by playing, Mass Migration lets you gain 5 PPs from all other players. And until, in this deck, there is the Death Ship. It's shuffled into the deck at random. Once the Death Ship shows up, the Plague has come, we flip over our Prosperity cards, and now we start losing PPs every turn. We roll our dice, we lose some PPs, and we go until there's one person left. I would classify this much more as an activity than a game, and it's not staying in my collection because it's a great game and I want to play it. We played this a lot, but you got to remember, when this came out in the late 90s, mid-90s actually, there wasn't a whole lot of gamer games. We were playing mostly card games and Settlers of Catan, and so this was one of those few games that we could just pull out and play as like a reprieve from playing a full night of Magic the Gathering. We would stay up and play card games all night, and then take this with us to Hardee's at 4 a.m. and have breakfast. And so there's some memories tied to this, but that's also not the reason I'm keeping this. The reason I'm keeping this is because for some reason, this game used to come up pretty regularly, a few times a year. Suddenly, somebody would talk about it, and everybody wanted it. For years, I would get trade requests for this game of like $200, $300, $400 worth of games. People would offer to send me, buy me $400 worth of games from, Miniature Market to get Plague and Pestilence off of me. And for that reason, this game's never going to leave my collection, because I find it very ridiculous that people were willing to spend that much money to try to get a copy of this. It's a very simple game. It's a very casual game with not a whole lot of frills. There's not a whole lot of strategy. You really can't plan much. You just got a very small hand of cards. There's no, you're not building an engine or doing anything special. You're just trying to survive. And it It blows my mind that I used to get those massive trade requests for this game. So that's why it's in my collection. That's why it will always be in my collection. You can see it's pretty beat up. It lived in my backpack for a long time because it was a good something to do while we're waiting on somebody to show up for game night, or something to do while we're waiting in line somewhere. Fun little game for that, but otherwise unremarkable. So there you go. 2 games that survived the cut in 2020. 2 games you probably cannot play or own, but I wanted to show them to you anyway. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is lexicon. It is a noun meaning the language or vocabulary of a specialized discipline or profession. In the lexicon of lip smacking, an epicure is fastidious in his choice and enjoyment of food, just as a subcon more expert than a gastronome. William Safire, an American journalist and presidential speechwriter. Lexicon, Lexicon. I probably said all of those words incorrectly because that was a ridiculous quote.